Hello, I'm Casey Aiken, and this is 21 This Week. Coming up next, government policy by virtue signaling. Are leadership and strategy missing from Montgomery County? Should felons be allowed to serve on juries? The General Assembly is considering it. World condemns Russian invasion of Ukraine. Our panel of insiders will give you the story behind the story. We're joined by former County Council member Mike Knapp and Secretary of the Maryland Republican Central Committee, Mark Uncapher. Stay tuned for these stories and more on the next 21 This Week. Over the past 2 weeks, we've had presentations on the proposed rezoning plan known as Thrive Montgomery 2050. What was striking during the discussion was the reoccurring idea that Montgomery County is rapidly approaching a county that can't get anything done. One, because of overregulation, and two, because paralysis by analysis has long been the joke about Montgomery County development plans, and it only seems to be getting worse. This week, there was an op-ed in Bethesda Magazine by Charles Nussel, who complained about the lack of leadership from the county council. Just a week earlier, there was another opinion piece about lack of leadership from the county executive. Now, maybe Thrive Montgomery 2050 is being sent back for further considerations because of equity. Because the council mandated in 2020 that every piece of legislation contain a racial equity statement. But this week, Council Member Tom Hucker and Council President Gabe Albanese introduced legislation requiring climate assessments for future council actions. Really, this sounds like a script from the Twilight Zone. It means that nothing, maybe nothing, will ever get done. Mike, legislators, are famous or infamous for posturing in front of the camera. I'm sure you never did that.
Never.
But they are also for virtue signaling. Do we really need to have an environmental impact statement on every piece of legislation that comes before the council?
Well, I think the challenge is, and you raise this in your preface, is what is the bigger plan? What is the strategy? The challenge I think we have as a county right now is our economy is moribund at best. Compared to our neighbors in any direction. There's more growth throughout the entire region than there is here. And so when you're looking at what we're trying to do, we've got to be able to say, we're headed in this direction. Should we look at equity? Should we look at the environment? Certainly we should. Those are things that should be taken into account, but in some context. And when everything else is kind of just dragging along, to throw these things on top, especially when there's a perception, as you, I think, rightly articulate, that people don't think we can get things done. It takes too long to get things done. We have to overcome those things first, and then be able to say how we look at equity and how we look at the environment and how we take those things into account. But you've got to come up with a direction, and you got to move in that direction before you start layering other things on top of it.
Well, what I find challenging, and part of this was because of the two discussions we had the last 2 weeks, one with the director of planning from the Park and Planning Commission, and last week with Meredith Wellington who represents the county executive, is that the opportunity for mischief in slowing down even good ideas, grows exponentially every time you layer on one of these requirements. What happened to the common sense and good judgment that we expect from our legislators? It looks to me that we're just dumping everything onto, to the bureaucracy to come up with their little check marks and a chop sheet. We're strangling in regulation, and not enough action by the people we're electing and we're paying their salaries for to make decisions. Mark, everywhere you turn, there's a new overreach. There's a bill, they passed this bill, and God bless Craig Rice for wanting to make sure that children are, get a nutritious meal. But is it really the job of the restaurant? Is it really the job of the council to tell parents what they need to feed their children?
Well, this is obviously a kind of a collectivist fantasy of sort of top-down mandates to the way people ought to eat. It's fascinating because if you actually look at the specifics both the nutrition and the science behind what's being mandated is up for grabs. It assumes that every kid is in the same position and at risk of becoming obese, and that's certainly not true. It also makes assumptions about whole milk, which the science, you can debate that. It says whole milk is bad. Well, that's not necessarily always true for every kid. But the top-down nature of this is really insulting to people. And I would argue at the end of the day, it's also politically disastrous for the county, because it really will end up driving away from our area to Virginia or Howard or wherever, people who want to make their own decisions and don't want to live this way.
Well, Mike, I mean, one of the things that I find is that, business people aren't stupid. They're going to find ways to get around this mandate. One of the easiest ways is to don't offer children menus. Just offer a full menu for everyone, and then the parents are going to pay more. This just seems insane, doesn't it?
Well, it does, but I think this really gets back to, where are we going? What's the direction in which we're heading? Where is Montgomery County? Where are we today? Where do we want to be? And I think if you can at least point to some direction we're going in, and whether it's the council that can do that, I think personally it's difficult for a legislature to take that leadership role. I think it really has to come from an executive position, but right now we haven't had that for a while. And so as a result, we're just doing stuff. And when you just do stuff, people are just coming up with things to do. And I think that's what you see. And I just think, I've read so many analyses over the last few months of, even we look at biotech. Biotech has obviously got a shot in the arm in the reaction to COVID and the things that we've done here in the county. And yet we still lag so much further behind Cambridge and Boston and in California. And rather than kind of think about how do we really accelerate this and how do we compete, we're so busy being happy that something good is happening that we're not really thinking about the strategy about how to leverage that and grow that forward. And I think that's our biggest challenge right now. There just isn't a direction. We're just doing things.
Well, there also doesn't seem to be a spirit of cooperation working with the private sector. I mean,
we haven't had that in 25 years.
Well, maybe 50 years.
Maybe.
But the idea is that those other jurisdictions that you listed in your answer just a minute ago, they seem to have a better working cooperation with the private sector because they target different sectors for growth, and they're willing to work with them. Every time we seem to offer those things, and I think Ike Leggett tried to do that during his administration, it gets stymied. It gets shot down, or somebody files a lawsuit.
Private sector is not woven into the fabric of Montgomery County. I mean, it's unfortunate, but I mean, it's just so many people who are in elected positions have never even had experience in the private sector. So they don't know what that means. They don't know what that is. And there's a suspicion and a skepticism of everything that's proposed from the private sector, which I think is really unfortunate for our community, but is a truism and has been for a long time.
So our economic development strategy, I guess going back at least 50 years, has been very simple. Federal government, that our proximity to the federal government first as a bedroom community for government workers, but then as a bedroom community, but also location for the government contractors that have sort of become the dominant employers over the last 20, 30 years. That's been our strategy. And query whether or not that's going to be able to be maintained in an environment where people can work remotely or jobs can be moved to other locations. And that's something that Montgomery County really has not faced up to.
Not at all.
Well, but it's worse than that, Mark. And it's not just, is the government going to decide to locate in Prince George's County or Montgomery County or the suburbs of Virginia? It's the related companies that do business with the federal government.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, I don't know of any large major consulting company that is headquartered here in Montgomery County. They're all, MITRE is over in Virginia. Rand Corporation is in Virginia. Mantech is in Virginia. They're all located in Virginia. They're deciding that they don't want to be in the state of Maryland. That's a huge problem for us. And we've got to recognize it. And unfortunately, we don't have a positive local government, either Prince George's County or Montgomery County, that is taking the lead on this.
No, I mean, it's been a challenge. It continues to be a challenge. And we have to, one of the things, and where this is going to be a real problem is going to be, we've been recession proof because of our ability to rely on the federal government. As we recover from each recession, we get closer and closer to not being recession proof. And it's kind of the boiling frog syndrome. And at some point, we're not going to be able to recover in a way that we always have. And so, but by the time we get to that point, it's going to be too late. And I don't want to say the sky is falling. We just need to be aware of these things and make better decisions.
Look, I'm right across from the old White Flint Shopping Center. Now, when the director of planning was on, she revealed that the owners of that site are pulling back on their development plans because they don't believe there's enough demand for the office space and even the residential space that was planned for that project. You know, something's got to give. We got to find a way to stimulate growth in Montgomery County, and it's got to come I think from the executive level. We got to switch gears, and I'm on a roll today because I'm angry about everything. And this is, the General Assembly is in session right now. And for the past 2 years, there's been an effort to try to, I guess, rehabilitate those people who have fallen on the wrong side of the law and have been convicted of crimes. And, but something's got to give here. We got to recognize that not every person who is convicted of a crime can be really rehabilitated or should be rehabilitated. But a bill has been introduced in the General Assembly that would allow people convicted of felonies. Felonies are a serious crime. You don't get convicted of a felony in our system unless you're a bad actor, to serve on juries. Now, Mark, this is, many people say, well, we're just trying to restore, the rights of a person after they've, gone through the system, have paid their time, and their rights should be reinstored. But this is also an effort because these people are going to be prejudiced against the criminal justice system. They're going to have a negative impact on jury pools. Isn't this just an effort by the defense bar to gain further advantage when it comes to criminal cases?
I think that's a fair characterization, and I appreciate the desire to allow people to get into the mainstream of community through work and what have you, and there obviously skills development that can contribute to that. I'm not sure that the same considerations exist for participating on juries. That's there's not a lot of employers who say, gee, you can't be on a jury, I won't hire you. They're concerned about other things. So I think that the argument that exists about bringing people in the mainstream is not as strong in cases in this particular instance.
So, Mike, I'm angry about what the General Assembly is doing. We just finished, in our last segment, talking about passing healthy meal choices for children here in Montgomery County. And then yesterday, I opened the newspaper and I see that I won't say the dumb bastards up in the General Assembly want to do it for the whole darn state. What is wrong with people?
You are on a roll today. I can't speak to everybody's motives. I'm not sure what's driving the issues that are out there. I think the felony piece is something that we need to look at, only because I think we've learned a lot in the last 5 to 7 years of who has been convicted, rightly or wrongly, and the ability to rehabilitate. And I think we've got to think about what that looks like, because if we think people have truly served their debt, then we have to give them the ability to reintegrate. And how do we do that and do that effectively? And I think if we're going to do that, we also need to allow them to be able to participate fully back in society again. That being said, we also have to make sure that people have the tools to do that reacclimation and make sure that that's working for them, so they can work for the broader society.
Well said, and much better put than I did. So we'll just leave it at that. When we come back from the short break, what to do about the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Stay tuned. And welcome back. 10 days ago, Russia, unprovoked and unrepentant, invaded the sovereign territory of its neighboring country of Ukraine. Mark, this is a sad thing that has happened. And the whole world is looking at this in wonderment that such a action would have happened. Is there a resolution to this issue?
I think the Russian people, the Russian oligarchs, the Russian military have got to do something about Putin. This is he has badly underestimated the Ukrainians. He's badly underestimated the will of the rest of Europe and obviously NATO. And it's hard to see how there's an outcome for him that is not at some point recognition that he has miscalculated and should be removed as leader of Russia.
So, Mike, everyone says it's all about the oil. And 60% of or 40% of the exports from the Soviet Union are energy related. We are still in importing hundreds of thousands of barrels of oil a day from Russia. And for the first time in my life, and I want our production staff to mark this down, for the first time in my life, I'm agreeing with Nancy Pelosi that we need to stop the importation of oil. Mike, what do you think?
Oh, no, I think we should. I think we definitely should. I think it's an interesting challenge. And obviously, we're far removed for any decisions that are being made and how they're being made. And the oil piece, interestingly, is really the only thing I've heard kind of where Republicans are even taking exception to where President Biden has gone so far with this. And the only thing I can come up with is with gas prices continuing to rise, then gas prices only rise further. So then he gets beat about the head and shoulders because gas prices have risen. That shouldn't, I don't think, weigh into this right now, because clearly the bigger issue is how do we stem the tide into Ukraine? And so I think you've got to cut off the imports. And I think we need to do that quickly. And I think there are many other things we ought to probably be doing to increase our participation without putting troops on the ground in the Ukraine as well. At this point, I'm stunned as I just sit and watch, listen to interviews of communities that a week ago existed fully formed, fully intact, fully functional, beautiful communities that have literally just been blown away by soldiers who don't even know what they're doing and don't know why they're doing it. They're being stopped and people are being asked, and they thought they were liberating people, and there's nobody there to liberate.
They were all free before.
They were all free to begin with.
So, I want to do a counterpoint to what Mike just said in part, because we certainly could cut off the oil from Russia, but we also can open up our own oil reserves and our natural gas reserves, which have been, to be fair, since President Biden has been president, has been shut, many of which have been shut down. Mark, what do you think?
Well, I think, that there's a sort of broader challenge. We need to take into account, for example, the energy requirements of our allies in the European and be able to kind of transition there. The Germans have frankly made a bad bet to rely on Russian natural gas, and it's going to be incumbent on us and others to help them make up that gap and allow them to continue to operate. Certainly, one of the challenges with gas and oil is, the exploration is really where the investment is, and once it's been discovered, it's a question of getting it through pipelines and other means to the individual marketplace. That's a long-term. As I come back to it, I think there's really a political change that will need to take place in Russia, and we'll see what happens.
Well, I think there's a political change that needs to take place here. I think our national policy is being overshadowed by environmental policy. Our national security needs. I mean, I'm a Cold War baby. I grew up, in an era where, we were worried about the threat of our adversaries across the sea, being Russia and China, and that one of the key things that was necessary for our security was to be energy independent. We're capable of that, and I don't understand why we don't continue to follow those policies.
Well, let's look here in Maryland at our decision not to frack, whereas, Pennsylvania has been at the cutting edge of energy development over the last decade or so. Here in Maryland and in some other states, we've blocked that. And were that to be available, we would be able to supply that German market.
But I think part of the challenge you run into is, and we've seen this, unfortunately, this a lot over the last 10 years. These have become binary choices, right? We either take care of the environment or we're drilling for oil. Well, it's not binary. We have to get to a point where we have to take an approach where we start to look at these things and recognizing that obviously there will be some environmental degradation if we're going to do some of these things, but not at the exclusion of everything. So with one administration, we go all the way one way. With another administration, we come all the way back the net. Yep. And the reality is we've got to come up with a way to operate somewhere towards the center and making rational decisions that allow us to be energy independent and also take a reasonably environmental focused approach to do that. Those aren't actually things to put together.
Yeah. And natural gas is a great transition fuel that reflects the transition that's taking place to having renewables take a larger share. And the use of natural gas has been very helpful for the environment because it's helped us wean away from coal.
Well, you're both right. And my first job was at the Department of Energy, and the Department of Energy back in the 80s was all about nuclear energy. And we've abandoned that in our country. We shouldn't. It's a clean source of energy. We'll find a solution to the pollution problem down the road. We got to wrap it up. These great minds, these foreign policy experts are going to have to take a break. When we come back, parting shots. Welcome back. Now with parting shots, Mark Uncapher.
Well, here's the good news, and then I'll give you the bad news. The good news is Maryland has a $4.6 billion surplus. And here's the bad news. The bad news is Democrats in the legislature are only prepared to give 2 cents on the dollar back and about $95 million in tax cuts. We should be providing far more tax relief to Maryland taxpayers.
Thank you, Mark. Mike Knapp, your parting shot.
Well, as one filing deadline for candidates has come and gone, and the next one is approaching, as the courts have moved it, I just want to do a shout out to all those folks who are actually either have decided that they want to run or are deciding that they want to run. I recognize that it's easy to disparage those people who ultimately get elected, but the reality is that if someone decides they want to run for office, they're putting their life out for public display and they're really making a commitment. And I just wanted to commend those who are deciding to do that and wish them all the best, however those chips may fall. It's a challenging time, and it's an important decision, and it's significant, and it's how our country operates.
You know, Mike, when you started that parting shot, I thought you were going to make an announcement.
No, sir.
Anyway, I have a very brief parting shot. Anytime that we hear the argument about raising the minimum wage, I just want to point out that the market does its own effective job. Target stores announced this week that they were raising the minimum wage for Target employees over scale up to $24 an hour. So let's recognize economic realism. Markets work. We got to wrap it up. I want to thank our panelists for being here today. We solved all of the world problems. Next week, we're going to talk about Iran. I'm kidding. And I want to thank the audience, of course, for tuning in each and every week to Montgomery County's hardest hitting political talk show. For 21 this week, I'm Casey Aiken.